Hey guys, tonight we are going to set aside the buzzing, glowing rectangles that run our lives and reach back into a time when the universe itself was the ultimate clockwork. Imagine holding the entire night sky in the palm of your hand, a map of the stars crafted from brass and brilliance. You're standing under a truly dark sky, the kind that doesn't exist for most of us anymore. The Milky Way isn't a faint smudge, it's a roaring river of light, so bright it feels like you could fall into it. It's beautiful, but also terrifyingly vast. And in this world, knowing your place in it and what time it is isn't a convenience, it's survival. Honestly, you probably won't survive this scenario without your GPS, but it's nice to imagine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let us know in the comments where you re-listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking along a path you can barely see, guided more by memory and the subtle texture of the dirt beneath your thin leather shoes than by sight. The air is cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Above you, the celestial sphere is a dizzying, overwhelming spectacle. It's like a cosmic connect-the-dots puzzle where the creator lost the numbers and used way too many dots. There's no soft orange glow from a nearby city to wash it all out, no passing airplanes to mistake for shooting stars. There is only you, the profound silence, and the relentless, silent turning of the cosmos. In this moment, the questions that haunt humanity feel incredibly close. Where are we? When are we? What comes next? You pull your cloak tighter, a rough-spun wool that does a decent job against the chill but still lets the deepest cold seep into your bones. The modern world has given us an easy answer to the question of when. You glance at a watch, a phone, a corner of a computer screen. Time is a number, precise and absolute. But here, time is a feeling, a position, a relationship between you and that vast, spinning darkness. Is it time for the night watch? Is it time for the pre-dawn prayers? Is it too late to be out here where the wolves are more than just a fairy tale? You pull out your phone out of instinct, but of course there's no signal. Not just no Wi-Fi, no signal since, well, ever. Your only pre-installed app is a deeply ingrained sense of avoiding things with sharp teeth. The moon, a perfect half slice tonight, tells you something, but its position is only a rough guide. You need precision. Your life, or at least your livelihood, depends on it. Whether you're a farmer needing to know the exact moment to plant, a monk needing to rise for matins, or a traveler needing to navigate by the stars, the sky is your only reliable guide. The challenge, then, is monumental. How do you take this infinite three-dimensional dome of moving lights and make it useful? How do you flatten it, tame it, and turn it into a tool you can consult as easily as we check our notifications? This is the ancient quest, a dream that stretches back thousands of years. It is a desire born from the very core of human consciousness, the need to find order in chaos, to predict the unpredictable, and to feel a sense of control in a world governed by vast, unknowable forces. This wasn't just about abstract science. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for early astronomy was agriculture, religion, or simple navigation, but the truth is it was likely an inseparable blend of all three. Knowing the heavens was knowing the mind of the gods, the schedule of the seasons, and your own path through the wilderness. Long before the device we're here to talk about, people were trying. You can picture them, generations of them, lying on their backs, tracing patterns with their fingers, giving them names of heroes and mythical beasts. They built massive stone circles, aligning them with the solstice sun. They carved star charts onto cave walls and reindeer bones. One of the most enchanting and mysterious examples of this is the Nebra sky disk, a Bronze Age artifact from Germany, a simple bronze plate inlaid with gold symbols representing the sun, moon, and a cluster of stars. It's a beautiful, primitive map of the sky, a testament to this deep, ancient longing to possess a piece of the heavens. It shows that for millennia, the best minds on Earth were wrestling with this problem. They knew the answers were up there, hiding in plain sight. They just needed the right key to unlock them. The intellectual crucible for this key was, famously, the Library of Alexandria. Here in the Hellenistic world, Greek mathematicians and astronomers like Ptolemy laid the mathematical groundwork necessary. They conceived of stereographic projection, a mind-bendingly clever way to project the points of a sphere onto a flat plane. It is the kind of genius idea that feels both impossibly complex and beautifully simple once you understand it. They were figuring out the mathematics of the cosmos, charting the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, and creating catalogs of stars with their positions carefully noted. They were building the theoretical engine, but it would take centuries and a journey across cultures and continents to build the machine that ran on it. This is the world you find yourself in. A world of deep, profound knowledge, but a world without pocket calculators or computers. A world where the most powerful computation device is the human mind, aided by instruments of wood, stone, and eventually, metal. The dream is to create something elegant, portable, and powerful, something that can model the entire universe, solve complex astronomical problems, and still fit in your hands. It is the ancient equivalent of deciding you are going to build your own smartphone from sand and a series of very clever thoughts. And against all odds, they did it. They created an object of both profound scientific utility and breathtaking artistic beauty. They built a mechanical model of the sky, a celestial computer, a star taker. They built the Astrolabe. And now one is in your hands. The first thing you notice is the weight. It's heavier than you expect, a solid disc of brass that feels cool against your palms, absorbing the warmth from your skin. It's about the size of a saucer, maybe a little smaller, and it hangs from a short chain attached to a sturdy ring. The metal is smooth, worn down by centuries of use, but as you tilt it, faint moonlight catches on a dizzying web of inscribed lines, curves, and strange, elegant script. At first glance, it looks like the final exam for a geometry class you definitely didn't study for. It seems impossibly complex, a beautiful but inscrutable puzzle. But as you hold it, you can feel the purposefulness in its design. This isn't just a piece of jewelry. This is an engine. The name itself, Astrolabe, is a clue. It comes to us from Greek, through Arabic, from the term Astrolabon, which can be translated as the star taker, or perhaps more poetically, the one who grasps the stars. And that's exactly what it is. It's a device designed to grasp the heavens, to take the measure of a star, and by doing so, to unlock the secrets of time and space. It's a bold, almost arrogant name for an instrument, but as you'll soon see, it's one it earns completely. It is the ultimate analog computer, a physical calculator that uses the real positions of celestial bodies as its input to solve an astonishing variety of problems. It's the original smartphone. It has a clock app, a GPS app, a calendar app, and even a will my upcoming sea voyage be a disaster astrology app. No flashlight, though. That was a major oversight. So what is this thing, fundamentally? The simplest way to think of it is as a two-dimensional model of the universe. Imagine you're standing in a field looking up. The sky appears as a giant three-dimensional dome over your head. The Astrolabe's genius lies in taking that 3D dome and flattening it onto a 2D disc, using a clever bit of mathematics called stereographic projection. Think of it like a world map. We all know the Earth is a sphere, but a globe is inconvenient to carry around. So we project that sphere onto a flat piece of paper. The continents get a bit stretched and distorted, especially near the poles, but it's a useful representation. The Astrolabe does the exact same thing for the sky. It takes the celestial sphere, with you at its center, and projects it onto a metal plate. This means that this small handheld object is a faithful map of the heavens as seen from your specific location on Earth. The best part? The battery life is infinite. The downside is that its operating system is, well, the entire universe, which is known to have a few bugs from time to time. The planispheric Astrolabe, which is the type you're holding and the most common kind throughout history, was not invented in one single flash of genius. Its theoretical principles were born in Hellenistic Greece, but it was in the medieval Islamic world that the instrument was truly perfected and transformed into the sophisticated device you now see. Scholars and craftsmen in centers of learning like Baghdad, Damascus, and Toledo refined its construction, improved its mathematical accuracy, and elevated its creation to a true art form. It became the quintessential instrument for any educated person, the symbol of a learned mind. With this celestial map, you could do incredible things. Its most famous use was telling time, especially at night, which was notoriously difficult before mechanical clocks. By measuring the altitude of a known star, you could determine the hour with surprising accuracy. During the day, you could do the same with the sun. You could also find the time of sunrise and sunset for any day of the year, or how long the day would be. You could predict which stars would be in the sky at any given hour on any given date. For a navigator, it could help determine latitude. For an architect or surveyor, its backside, often equipped with a rotating sighting rule, could be used to measure the height of a mountain or a building from a distance. It was an all-in-one toolkit for understanding the world. But this raises a fascinating question. Scholars continue to debate just how widespread the use of the astrolabe was among common people, or if it remained primarily a tool for a highly educated elite. Was this something only a court astronomer or a wealthy merchant would own? Or could a ship's captain or a master builder reasonably be expected to have and use one? The immense skill required to both make and operate an astrolabe suggests it was a specialist's instrument. Each one was a handcrafted masterpiece, and understanding its myriad functions required a solid grounding in astronomy and mathematics. And yet, practical simplified versions were also made, suggesting a demand beyond the ivory tower. Beyond its purely scientific and practical applications, the astrolabe often ventured into the mystical. Many were designed not just for astronomy, but for astrology, which in this period were considered two sides of the same coin. Some of the intricate markings on the plates relate to the houses of the zodiac, used for casting horoscopes and determining auspicious moments for everything from getting married to starting a battle. There are even obscure texts describing how to use an astrolabe for a sort of celestial divination, a way to find lost items by calculating planetary positions. It was a tool that sat at the crossroads of science, faith, and magic, a perfect reflection of the medieval mind. It represented a universe that was not just a giant clockwork machine, but a living, breathing entity filled with meaning and messages if you only had the right device to read them. And this little brass disc in your hands was that device. It was the key. It was the key. But a key has to be forged. Its design must be conceived in a brilliant mind long before its teeth are ever cut from metal. To find the origin of this idea, you have to let the brass in your hand dissolve into memory, letting your senses drift backwards through time. The cool, damp night of medieval Europe recedes, replaced by a brilliant, almost blinding sunlight. You're standing on a stone quay, the air thick with the smell of salt, olives, and something else. Papyrus. The murmur around you is a tapestry of languages: Greek, Egyptian, Latin, Persian. You are in the Hellenistic world, the intellectual forge where the astrolabe's soul was hammered into shape. This isn't a world of whispered prayers in dark monasteries. It's a world of loud, public debate under the shade of marble porticos. Your journey takes you to the island of Rhodes and later to the intellectual supernova that was Alexandria. Here, sometime in the 2nd century BC, you might see a man named Hipparchus of Nicaea. He is often called the greatest astronomical observer of antiquity, and for good reason. Imagine trying to do trigonometry without a calculator or even cheap, plentiful paper, just a sharp stick, a patch of smooth sand, and a powerful sense of intellectual superiority. That was his world. It's the ultimate academic flex. Hipparchus spent countless nights meticulously charting the positions of the stars, creating a catalog of over 1,000 of them with their celestial coordinates. He wasn't just listing them. He was measuring their relationships, building a true mathematical map of the heavens. In the process, he made a staggering discovery: the precession of the equinoxes. He noticed that the position of the stars at the beginning of spring had shifted ever so slightly compared to older Babylonian records. He had discovered the slow 26,000-year wobble of the Earth on its axis. a motion so subtle it's almost imperceptible. This is the kind of mind we read dealing with, a mind capable of seeing the grandest and slowest of cosmic motions. This meticulous work was essential, but Hipparchus's most important contribution to our story is his work with stereographic projection. This is the mathematical technique we talked about, the one that allows you to map a sphere onto a flat surface. Historians and classicists still debate whether Hipparchus truly invented stereographic projection or if he simply was the first to apply it systematically to astronomical problems. Either way, he understood its power. The method is elegant. You imagine the celestial sphere, that giant globe of stars with the Earth at its center. You then place a conceptual light source at one of the celestial poles, say the South Pole. This light then casts a shadow of the other hemisphere's stars and coordinate lines onto a flat plane cutting through the celestial equator. The result is a perfect flat map of the sky. What makes this projection so magical, and so perfect for an astrolabe, is that all circles on the sphere remain circles on the flat map. This property is crucial for accurately representing the paths of the sun and stars. Hipparchus had figured out how to write the software for the astrolabe, even if the hardware didn't fully exist yet. The knowledge of Hipparchus and his contemporaries could easily have been lost, a footnote in the ashes of history. But it was painstakingly gathered, refined, and preserved by another giant of ancient thought, Claudius Ptolemy, who lived in Alexandria about 3 centuries later. If Hipparchus was the brilliant field researcher, Ptolemy was the master synthesizer, the one who wrote the definitive textbook. His book, the Megal Syntaxis, or Great Treatise, became so revered that when later translated into Arabic, it was given the title Almagest, the greatest. We know it today as the Almagest. Ptolemy's Almagest was so influential that for the next millennium and a half, arguing with it was like trying to argue with gravity. You could do it, but you probably wouldn't get very far and you'd look silly trying. It laid out a complete, mathematically rigorous geocentric model of the universe. And crucially for our story, in another of his works called the Planispherium, Ptolemy provides the first surviving complete mathematical description of stereographic projection. He essentially wrote the user's manual for the astrolabe's core principle. The Greeks didn't just have the theory, they had a profound appreciation for sophisticated machinery. Nothing proves this more than the most astonishing artifact ever recovered from the ancient world, the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Roman-era shipwreck off the coast of a Greek island. This device is a shoebox-sized contraption of complex bronze gears. For decades, its true purpose was a mystery. But modern imaging has revealed it to be an incredibly sophisticated astronomical computer. By turning a crank, its user could predict the position of the sun, the moon, and the 5 visible planets, the timing of eclipses, and even the schedule of the Olympic Games. Finding the Antikythera mechanism was like finding a fully functional laptop in a pirate's treasure chest. It completely shattered the assumption that high-precision geared machinery was a much later invention. While it works on different principles than the astrolabe, it proves that the Hellenistic mind was more than capable of conceiving and building complex analog computers. The astrolabe wasn't a random leap of genius. It was a product of a culture that was deeply engaged in mechanically modeling the cosmos. So, the Greeks gave us the theory. They provided the star charts from Hipparchus, the mathematical framework of stereographic projection from Ptolemy, and a cultural mindset, evidenced by the Antikythera mechanism, that believed the universe could be modeled by human hands. They had all the ingredients. They had drawn up the blueprints for the key. But the work of actually cutting it, of refining it into the beautiful, versatile brass instrument you imagined in your hand, that task would fall to another culture, in another time. The bright Mediterranean sun begins to fade, and the story of the astrolabe moves eastward, into the world of desert stars and soaring minarets. The bright Mediterranean sun fades, and the story of the astrolabe moves eastward, into the world of desert stars and soaring minarets. As your mind arrives in this new landscape, the ethereal concept of the astrolabe solidifies once again into the brass object in your hands. But now you see it differently. You understand the Greek soul within it, the ghost of its mathematical principles. Now let's get to know its body, We're going to mentally disassemble this beautiful machine piece by piece to understand how it works. Don't worry, there are no tiny screws to lose in the carpet. The first part you touch, the very foundation of the instrument, is the piece you've been holding all along. It's a heavy, hollow disc with a thick, raised rim. This is called the mater, from the Latin for mother. It is the womb of the astrolabe, the component that holds and protects all the others. The mater is basically the bouncer of the astrolabe. It's big, solid, and its job is to make sure everything inside behaves. It's the strong, silent type. The hollowed-out center, the part that looks like a shallow bowl, is called the womb for that very reason. It is where the other, more delicate parts will rest. If you were to turn it over, you'd find its back is not blank. The back of the mater is a workspace in its own right, covered in finely engraved scales. There's often a circle marked with 360 degrees like a protractor for measuring angles. You might also find a calendar scale showing the months and the corresponding signs of the zodiac, used to determine the sun's position on any given day of the year. It's a dense, beautiful display of information, a reminder that this is a multi-purpose calculator. But the real magic begins when you look inside the mater's womb. Lying there, perfectly snug within the raised rim, is a thin, flat plate. If you lift it out, you find it's engraved with a different set of circles and arcs. This is the most critical component for personalizing the astrolabe. This plate is called a tympan, or sometimes a climate. It is a map, but not a map of a country or a continent. It is a map of the sky as it appears from a specific latitude on Earth. That's the secret. The astrolabe isn't a generic map of the universe. It's a model of the universe customized for you, right where you stand. The lines etched upon its surface represent your local sky. There's a prominent arc that represents your horizon. Everything above that line is visible in your sky. Everything below it is hidden from view. Another set of concentric circles represents lines of equal altitude, like the contour lines on a topographical map. The very center represents the zenith, the point directly over your head. Using a tympan designed for the wrong city is like trying to use a map of London to navigate Tokyo. You'll have a lot of confidence and the instrument will seem to be working, but you're going to end up walking into a noodle shop when you were looking for Buckingham Palace. Because the stars you see, and how high they appear in the sky, depend entirely on your latitude, you need a plate that matches your location. An astronomer in Baghdad would see a different sky than a scholar in Cordoba, so each would need their own specific tympan. This is why the plate was also known as a climate. In the geographical system inherited from the Greeks, the world was divided into 7 climes, or zones, based on latitude. So a plate for a certain latitude was a plate for a certain climate. This led to an elegant solution for the well-traveled scholar or merchant. Instead of owning multiple astrolabes, you would own one good mater and a set of interchangeable tympans. You can imagine a wealthy patron commissioning a beautiful astrolabe, its mater perhaps inlaid with silver, and ordering plates for all the cities he might visit: Cairo, Damascus, Mecca, Isfahan. These plates would be stacked neatly inside the mater's womb, ready to be swapped out as needed. It's a bit like buying DLC for your astrolabe. Oh, you plan on making the pilgrimage to Mecca and then continuing to Samarkand for trade? That'll be 2 extra tympans, please. The ultimate medieval microtransaction. Some of these deluxe sets had so many plates that the astrolabe became a thick, heavy stack of brass, more of a status symbol to show off your worldliness than a practical field instrument. The accuracy of these plates is astonishing when you consider the tools they had. Each line, the horizon, the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, the arcs of altitude, is a precise stereographic projection calculated for a specific latitude. This, of course, required knowing the latitude of these cities with a high degree of precision in the first place. Historians of cartography and science still debate the exact methods and level of precision used by early astrolabists to survey and calculate the coordinates for the dozens of cities found engraved on these tympans. It points to a sophisticated network of knowledge sharing and a deep tradition of precise measurement that stretched across the Islamic world. So now you have the foundation, the mater, which provides the frame and the general purpose scales. And inside it you have placed the tympan, the plate that has calibrated the instrument for your exact place in the world. The astrolabe now knows your horizon. It knows what is up and what is down from your unique perspective. It's been localized. The stage is set, but a stage is empty without its actors. The next piece we will look at is the one that brings the stars themselves into the picture. A stage is empty without its actors. And the next piece you lift from our imaginary toolkit is the one that brings the stars themselves into the picture. You gently pick it up. It's surprisingly light, and unlike the solid plates you've handled so far, this one is mostly empty space. It's a delicate open-work web of polished brass, a skeletal lattice of sweeping curves and sharp points that looks like a metallic spiderweb. This is the rete, and it is the beating heart of the astrolabe. It's the most visually stunning component, a piece of scientific sculpture that is both a precise map and a work of art. The rete is the supermodel of the astrolabe family. It's gorgeous, impossibly delicate, and does all the important work, but you're constantly terrified you're going to break it. You carefully place the rete into the mater, on top of the tympan. It settles into place, and you can see the engraved lines of your local sky map on the tympan, peeking through the gaps in the rete's design. The Arabic name for this part is al-ankabut, which literally means the spider, a name that perfectly captures its spindly web-like appearance. And like a spider's web, its function is to catch things, in this case, stars. The rete is a star chart. Like the tympan, it's a stereographic projection, but instead of mapping the fixed grid of your local sky, it maps the stars themselves. Each of the sharp, flame-like or leaf-shaped pointers that make up its intricate design corresponds to a specific, bright star in the night sky. The very tip of that pointer marks the star's exact position on the celestial map. The selection of stars on a rete was a matter of choice and craftsmanship. A simple, practical astrolabe might have as few as 15 or 20 of the brightest and most easily identifiable stars. A more elaborate, high-precision instrument made for a royal astronomer, however, could have pointers for 40, 50, or even more stars, requiring the rete to be an incredibly complex and delicate piece of metalwork. On the rete in your hand, you might be able to trace the pointers for stars you know. There is Vega, a brilliant star of summer. There is Altair and Deneb, which together form the summer triangle. You might find the defiant orange glint of Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, or the steadfast light of Capella. Each pointer is a frozen metallic representation of a distant sun. The second crucial feature you see on the rete is a prominent off-center circle. This circle is usually marked with the degrees of the ecliptic, and often with the symbols or names for the 12 constellations of the zodiac. This is the ecliptic circle, and it represents the single most important path in the sky, the apparent yearly journey of the sun against the background of the stars. It's basically the sun's annual parade route through the heavens. The zodiac signs are the different celestial neighborhoods it passes through on its trip, some decidedly fancier than others. Sorry, Scorpios. By including the ecliptic on the rete, the astrolabist connected the daily motion of the stars with the annual motion of the sun, allowing the instrument to function as both a clock and a calendar. The true genius of the astrolabe's design is revealed not when the rete is still, but when it moves. The rete is not fixed. It is designed to rotate freely over the tympan below. And when you turn it, you are simulating the daily rotation of the Earth. One full, slow spin of the rete represents a full 24-hour day. As you turn it, you can see the star pointers sweep across the map of your local sky engraved on the tympan. You can watch the pointer for Sirius pass over the eastern horizon line, which means you are watching it rise. You can continue to turn it and watch it reach its highest point in the sky, and then watch it sink below the western horizon, setting. Rotating the rete is like fast-forwarding the universe. You can see stars rise and set in seconds. It's the ultimate power trip, a pocket-sized time machine for celestial events. No DeLorean required. This simple, elegant rotation is the core computational function of the entire device. The construction of the rete was where the astrolabist could truly show their skill, not just as a scientist, but as an artist. The star pointers didn't need to be fancy. A simple, sharp dagger shape would have worked perfectly well. But they were rarely just simple. They were made into elegant sweeping curves, shaped like the leaves of a thistle, the heads of birds, or the petals of a flower. The famous 10th century astronomer Al-Sufi was so revered that a particular flame-like pointer on many Islamic astrolabes is still called the dagger of Al-Sufi. Some European reties have distinctly Gothic architectural features, with pointers shaped like the tracery of a cathedral window. There is considerable scholarly debate about the visual language of the rete, specifically whether the elaborate, non-functional flourishes were purely decorative, or if they carried additional symbolic, astrological, or even talismanic meaning for the user. Were the floral patterns simply a matter of taste, or did they represent the heavens as a celestial garden? We may never know, but they undeniably transform a scientific instrument into an object of profound beauty. So now the main components are assembled. You have the mater, the body. You have the tympan, the local context. And now, rotating gracefully on top, you have the rete, the map of the heavens in motion. For the first time, you can see how this pocket universe works. It's a dynamic model, a dance of metal and mathematics that mirrors the grand, silent dance of the stars themselves. It's a dynamic model, a dance of metal and mathematics that mirrors the grand, silent dance of the stars themselves. But every dance needs a stage, a vibrant hall where the music is perfected and the steps are refined. For the Astrolabe, that stage was one of the most remarkable cities on Earth. Let the physical object in your hands fade once more, and allow yourself to be carried by the warm night air, not back in time but across the globe. You are now walking the bustling streets of 8th century Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. This is the city of peace, Madinat al-Salam, the largest and richest city in the world, a nexus of trade, culture, and scholarship that glittered at the center of a vast empire. The air here is a heady mix of exotic spices from the east, the rich perfume of jasmine from courtyard gardens, and the sharp scholarly smell of ink and old parchment. You hear the rhythmic call of the muezzin from countless minarets, the chatter of merchants in a dozen languages, and the intense murmur of scholars debating logic and metaphysics in the shade of an arcade. This is the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. While many European kings were busy figuring out the finer points of feudalism and mud, the caliphs in Baghdad were spending staggering fortunes on books, observatories, and attracting the greatest minds they could find. Different priorities, I suppose. One gets you a damp castle, the other gets you a functioning model of the universe. Your path leads you to the gates of a legendary institution, the Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. Historians still debate the precise nature of the House of Wisdom, whether it was a formal, centralized academy with a paid staff in a single building, or a more loosely organized royal library and collection of scholarly projects sponsored by the caliph. Whatever its exact structure, its impact is undisputed. Founded by the great Caliph Harun al-Rashid of 1001 Nights fame and expanded by his son al-Ma'mun, the House of Wisdom was the intellectual engine of the empire. It was a library, a university, and a translation bureau all in one. The caliphs, driven by a profound thirst for knowledge, sponsored a massive project known as the translation movement. This wasn't just a casual affair, like hitting translate page on a website. This was a multi-generational, empire-spanning, state-sponsored project to find, acquire, copy, and understand every important book from every great civilization. Agents were sent to the Byzantine Empire, to Persia, to India, tasked with bringing back manuscripts on medicine, engineering, mathematics, and of course, astronomy. It is here, in the halls of the House of Wisdom, that the works of Ptolemy and Hipparchus were given a new life. Scholars, often Christians or Jews fluent in Syriac and Greek, would translate these ancient texts into Arabic. The Almagest became the cornerstone of their astronomical studies. They didn't just translate, they absorbed. They embraced the Greek legacy of rational inquiry and made it their own. A lovely, though likely apocryphal story tells that the Caliph al-Ma'mun was inspired to ramp up this effort after having a vivid dream in which he personally conversed with the philosopher Aristotle. Whether true or not, it speaks to the immense reverence they held for this inherited knowledge. But the scholars of Baghdad were not mere librarians. They were brilliant scientists in their own right. They read Ptolemy not as gospel, but as the best work of a predecessor, a foundation upon which to build. They found errors in his calculations. They noticed that his star charts, now centuries old, were no longer perfectly accurate due to the slow precession we talked about earlier. So they set about making new observations. Al-Ma'mun built the first major astronomical observatory in the Islamic world, the Al-Shamsiyya Observatory in Baghdad. Here, astronomers used massive, sophisticated instruments to remeasure the sky with unprecedented accuracy. They recalculated the length of the year, the tilt of the Earth's axis, and produced new, more reliable star catalogs, known as ZIJ. This feverish intellectual activity created the perfect environment for the astrolabe to flourish. The practical needs of the empire provided the funding and the motivation. For a Muslim, knowing the precise direction of Mecca, the Qibla, for daily prayers was a religious duty. From a city like Baghdad, this was a non-trivial astronomical problem to solve, and the astrolabe was the perfect tool for the job. Likewise, the 5 daily prayer times are defined by the position of the sun. The astrolabe could determine these moments, from the first light of dawn to the deep darkness of night, with ease. It was an instrument that served both God and the state. And here, in Baghdad, were all the necessary components for its perfection. The preserved Greek theory, the improved observational data from the new observatories, and a culture of master craftsmen capable of working metal with incredible precision. Questioning Ptolemy's data was a big deal. It was like telling your grandfather his most cherished story about the good old days is factually inaccurate. You'd better have your own, better data ready to back it up. And the astronomers of Baghdad did. They were ready to build a better key. But the theoretical knowledge of a scholar, however brilliant, is little more than ink on parchment until it meets the hands of a master craftsman. You leave the hallowed, quiet halls of the House of Wisdom and follow a narrow, winding street into the artisans' quarter of Baghdad. The air changes. The delicate scent of paper is replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of the forge and the bite of charcoal smoke. The sound of quiet debate gives way to the rhythmic clang, clang, clang of a hammer on an anvil. You have arrived at the workshop of an Astrolabe, an astrolabist. This is where the magic happens. This is where the universe is given form in metal. The man you see inside is not just a blacksmith or a simple metalworker. He is something far more rare. The job posting for a master astrolabist would be intense. Seeking detail-oriented individual. Must be a master metallurgist, fluent in advanced trigonometry, and know at least 40 stars by their first name. Competitive salary and a camel. No fakers. This craftsman is a polymath, a living bridge between the abstract world of mathematics and the physical reality of brass and bronze. He has to be a scientist and an artist in equal measure. There is a recurring debate among historians of science as to the relationship between the theoretical astronomers and the practical craftsmen. Was the astrolabist a scholar who knew metalworking, or a master craftsman who had learned the necessary mathematics? And how closely did they collaborate with the observers in the great observatories? The truth is likely that the most successful astrolabists were a seamless fusion of both. His workshop is a space of controlled chaos. Along one wall are the tools of a metalsmith, hammers, files, tongs, and a small furnace glowing with a soft orange heat. On a sturdy wooden bench, however, are the tools of a geometer, compasses, dividers, rulers, and scribing tools with needle-sharp points. Tacked to the wall are not rough sketches of swords or ewers, but complex geometric diagrams, projections of the celestial sphere, and lists of star coordinates, the latest data brought from the city's observatory. He begins the process with a blank disc of high-quality brass cast in a mold and then hammered and filed until it is perfectly flat and smooth. The quality of the metal is crucial. It must be free of imperfections that could snag the engraving tool or mar the final appearance. Then begins the most difficult and time-consuming part of the entire process, the layout and engraving. Using his dividers and a sharp scribe, he begins to mark the brass. This is where his mathematical knowledge is put to the test. He isn't just copying a pattern. For each tympan, he must generate the stereographic projection from scratch, using mathematical formulas to plot the curves for the horizon, the almucantars, and the azimuths for that specific latitude. Then, with a tool called a burin, a simple steel rod with a sharpened point, he begins to cut. Every single line on the finished astrolabe is carved out by hand, one steady, careful push at a time. A tiny curl of brass shavings rises from the tip of the tool as it glides across the surface. Engraving an astrolabe by hand is the medieval equivalent of trying to perform surgery on a microchip with a sewing needle. The level of precision required is terrifying, and there is absolutely no undo button. One slip of the hand, one moment of distraction, could ruin days or even weeks of painstaking labor. You watch as he engraves the rede, cutting away the empty space to create that delicate web-like star map. He doesn't just cut functional pointers. He gives them life, shaping them into the graceful flowing curves that are the signature of his workshop. This is a point of professional pride. You can often identify an astrolabe's city of origin, and sometimes even the specific workshop, not by a signature, but by its unique artistic style. The astrolabists of Isfahan in Persia, for example, developed a particularly elegant and ornate style for their retes, which is distinct from the more robust functional designs of their counterparts in the Maghreb. It's like being able to tell a Rembrandt from a Vermeer by the brushwork alone. These craftsmen had their own schools and traditions. Finally, after all the components are cut and engraved, comes the finishing touch. With immense pride, the craftsman takes a pointed punch and begins to carefully stamp his name, the city and the date into a blank space on the back of the mater or on the rim. Many of the most beautiful surviving astrolabes are signed artifacts. They carry inscriptions like, crafted by Hamid ibn Ali al-Wasiti in Baghdad, year 343 of the Hijra. This act transforms them from anonymous scientific objects into personal testaments of skill. Signing your astrolabe was the ultimate craftsman's flex. It's a quiet declaration across the centuries saying, "Yes, I made this perfect model of the cosmos. My name is on it. What did you do today?" The parts are then assembled, the pin is slid through the center to hold them all together, and the rule and horse, the sighting vane and its connecting piece, are attached. The instrument is complete. It is a perfect key forged by a master locksmith of the heavens, ready to unlock the secrets of the sky. It is a perfect key, forged by a master locksmith of the heavens, ready to unlock the secrets of the sky. But even the most perfectly crafted key is useless if the information used to cut its teeth is wrong. An astrolabe is a snapshot of the cosmos, and if that snapshot is out of date, the instrument, for all its beauty, becomes little more than an elaborate brass coaster. The beautiful rete in your hands with its sharp, elegant pointers is only as good as the astronomical data that dictated where those pointers should be placed. Making a 10th century astrolabe with 2nd century star data is like trying to use an original iPhone today. Sure, it was amazing for its time, but you're not going to be running any modern apps on it. The star catalog that the Islamic world inherited from Ptolemy's Almagest was a monumental achievement. But by the time our astrolabist is at his bench in Baghdad, it was nearly 800 years old. And the sky, as we know, is not static. The slow, patient wobble of the Earth's axis, the precession of the equinoxes that Hipparchus himself discovered, meant that the celestial coordinate system had drifted. All the stars had shifted their positions slightly. The old coordinates were no longer quite right. For a casual stargazer, the difference might be negligible, but for an instrument designed for precision, it was a critical flaw. The software needed a major update. You now find yourself in the magnificent city of Isfahan, in Persia, in the middle of the 10th century. Here, in the service of the emir, is an astronomer named Abd al-Rahman al-Sufi, known in the West as Azofi. Al-Sufi was basically the world's most dedicated fact-checker. He embarked on a project of breathtaking ambition and meticulous detail to take Ptolemy's masterpiece, pull out a celestial red pen, and systematically revise it for his own time. His resulting work, Kitab Suwar al-Kawakib, or the Book of Fixed Stars, would become one of the most important astronomical texts of the Middle Ages. Al-Sufi's method was a model of scientific rigor. For each of the 48 classical constellations described by Ptolemy, he would compare the ancient Greek descriptions to the reality of the clear, dark desert sky above him. Using instruments, perhaps even an astrolabe, he would re-measure the celestial latitude and longitude of each star. He also did something Ptolemy had done, but with a more critical eye. He estimated each star's magnitude or brightness. He created a clear system, noting which stars were of the first magnitude, the brightest, which were of the second, and so on. He noted errors in Ptolemy's work, stars that were missing, and stars that Ptolemy had included which Al-Sufi could not find. His book of fixed stars was immensely practical, presenting the information for each constellation with a detailed textual description, a table of his corrected star coordinates, and most wonderfully 2 drawings. One showed the constellation as it would appear on a celestial globe, meaning in reverse, and the other showed it as you would actually see it looking up at the night sky. It is in this book that we find a quiet, almost understated moment of profound discovery. While observing the constellation of Andromeda, Al-Sufi noted a little cloud, or a smudge, something that local Persian astronomers had apparently known about for some time. We know this smudge today as Messier 31, the Andromeda Galaxy. Looking at that faint patch of light, Al-Sufi was, without knowing it, gazing upon a separate city of 1 trillion suns over 2.5 million light-years away. It is the first definite historical record of an observation of another galaxy beyond our own. Imagine just casually discovering another galaxy. A weird little cloud. You write it down and move on with your star catalog, completely unaware you've just documented a new universe. Talk about burying the lead. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion regarding the extent of Al-Sufi's originality versus his role as a brilliant reviser. Was he primarily a meticulous corrector of Ptolemy's work, or do his observations on variable stars and what he called nebulous objects like the Andromeda Galaxy represent a more fundamental break with the classical tradition? While he worked firmly within the Ptolemaic framework, his insistence on fresh, direct observation and his willingness to correct the revered ancient master set a new standard for scientific practice. The impact of Al-Sufi's work on the craft of the astrolabe was immediate and profound. His updated and far more accurate star catalog became the new benchmark. The Astrolabe in his workshop could now engrave the rete with a newfound confidence. The pointers for Vega and Altair and Sirius would not just be beautiful, they would be precisely correct for their era. The astrolabe transformed from a very good instrument into a high-precision one. The homage to Al-Sufi's importance is literally engraved in metal on many later astrolabes, which feature a distinctive star pointer on the rete known as the dagger of Al-Sufi. The new software was installed. The key was now cut to perfection, ready to work in the intricate lock of the cosmos. The key was now cut to perfection, ready to work in the intricate lock of the cosmos. But humans are rarely content with mere function. We have a deep-seated need to make our most important objects beautiful. A tool that can model the universe is certainly an important object, and it's no surprise that the astrolabe was elevated from a simple scientific instrument into a canvas for breathtaking artistry and a powerful symbol of status. You begin to see that the astrolabe in your hands is not just a piece of scientific equipment, it is a piece of luxury technology. Owning a beautifully crafted astrolabe in the 10th or 11th century was the equivalent of wearing a high-end Swiss watch today. It did a job, yes, but its real purpose was to send a message about its owner. It spoke of wealth, of a fine education, and of a connection to the highest echelons of power and learning. The finest astrolabes were not typically off-the-shelf items purchased by working astronomers. They were bespoke commissions, ordered by caliphs, sultans, viziers, and fantastically wealthy merchants. This system of elite patronage drove the astrolabe's evolution as an art object. A ruler would commission an instrument for his court library or his favorite astronomer, not just to advance science, but to display the sophistication and intellectual prowess of his court. The astrolabe became an instrument of cultural propaganda. Owning a silver-inlaid astrolabe was like pulling up to a rival emir's palace in a custom-built chariot. It quietly announced, "Yes, we appreciate the finer things, and by the way, we can also predict eclipses and the downfall of your kingdom. How are your goats?" You can see this dedication to beauty in every part of the instrument. The elegant Arabic script, whether the angular kufik or the flowing nask, was itself a revered art form. The names of the stars on the rete and the cities on the tympans were not just legible labels. They were examples of masterful calligraphy, their lines perfectly balanced and proportioned. The metal itself was often elevated. While brass was the standard, a wealthy patron might commission an astrolabe with a silver wreath, the bright white metal creating a stunning contrast with the golden brass of the tympan below. Some were even decorated with intricate inlays, with thin lines of silver or copper hammered into the brass to create shimmering, complex patterns. Nowhere is this artistic impulse more obvious than in the part of the astrolabe known as the cursi, or the throne. This is the often highly ornate bracket that connects the body of the astrolabe to the suspension ring and chain. Scientifically speaking, the throne is almost entirely superfluous. A simple, sturdy loop would have done the job, but the throne was almost never simple. It became the astrolabist's primary canvas for pure, non-functional decoration. It was the astrolabe's hat. It serves no real purpose, but a really fancy one shows everyone you have impeccable taste. Astrolabists lavished attention on the throne, crafting it into complex patterns of interwoven leaves and vines known as arabesques, or adorning it with elaborate calligraphic inscriptions, often quoting the Quran or praising the patron. Art historians and historians of science often debate the driver of astrolabe design. Did the scientific need for clarity and precision dictate the aesthetic, or did the desire for a beautiful object of status sometimes compromise or overshadow its scientific function? On some incredibly ornate examples, the decoration on the rete is so dense and the calligraphy so stylized that it can actually make the instrument harder to read. This suggests that, at least for the highest end of the market, form sometimes triumphed over function. Some of these presentation astrolabes were so large, heavy, and ornate that they were essentially useless for fieldwork. They were the medieval equivalent of a diamond-encrusted smartphone. Sure, it probably works, but you were far too afraid of scratching it to ever actually take it out of the palace. These were diplomatic gifts, symbols of intellectual might, or library showpieces, their primary purpose being to be admired, not used. This dual identity is what makes the astrolabe such a fascinating artifact. It sits perfectly at the intersection of science, art, and power. It is a testament to a culture that did not see these things as separate categories. The pursuit of knowledge was an act of piety. The creation of beauty was a reflection of divine order. The possession of such an object was a clear sign of your elevated place within that order. The astrolabe wasn't just a tool for understanding the heavens. It was a mirror that reflected the owner's ideal self, learned, pious, wealthy, and powerful. It was a universe you could hold in your hand, yes, but it was also a world of social meaning, all contained in one beautiful, intricate disc of metal. It was a universe you could hold in your hand, yes, but it was also a world of social meaning, all contained in one beautiful, intricate disc of metal. Yet beyond the palaces and libraries, this intricate device served a purpose that was woven into the very fabric of daily life for millions. Its most profound application was not just in knowing the cosmos, but in practicing one's faith. For in the medieval Islamic world, the rhythms of life were dictated by the heavens, and the astrolabe was the perfect instrument to interpret them. You are now a traveler, perhaps a merchant with a caravan of camels, resting at an oasis in the vast emptiness of the desert. The sun is beginning its long descent towards the horizon. It is time for the afternoon prayer, the Asr. But when, exactly, the 5 daily prayers, or salat, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, are not set to a specific time on a clock. They are tied to the sun's position in the sky. Fajr at dawn, Dhuhr at high noon, Asr in the afternoon, Maghrib at sunset, and Isha at nightfall. Trying to guess these moments was possible but imprecise. Does that shadow look long enough for the afternoon prayer? Or am I just feeling particularly short today? The astrolabe removed all doubt. With your astrolabe, you could take a quick sighting of the sun to determine the current time. But it was often even easier than that. Many astrolabes had the prayer times engraved directly onto the tympan plates as special arcs. The time for the Asr prayer, for instance, was defined in a couple of different ways, but both were related to the length of an object's shadow. This is a simple trigonometric function of the sun's altitude, and so it could be pre-calculated and drawn as a curving line on the astrolabe. To find the time for prayer, you would simply rotate the rete until the sun's position for that day fell upon the Asr curve. Then the rule would point directly to the correct time on the edge of the instrument. It was an elegant, graphical solution to a daily religious requirement. But there was another, even more crucial, requirement for prayer. A Muslim must pray facing the Kaaba in Mecca. This direction is known as the Qibla. If you are in Damascus or Cordoba or Samarkand, determining the Qibla is a sophisticated problem in spherical trigonometry. It's not just point towards the big desert. You need to know your own precise latitude and longitude, and the latitude and longitude of Mecca, and then calculate the angle between them along the surface of a sphere. This is a calculation that would make most of us immediately reach for a smartphone app. They, however, reached for this different kind of smart device. While a standard astrolabe could help you find your latitude and the cardinal directions, solving for the Qibla required extra tools. To meet this need, craftsmen developed specialized markings and diagrams, often engraved on the back of the mater. These Qibla finders were graphical calculators. A common type was a chart centered on Mecca, showing a number of major cities. To use it, you would find your current location on the chart, and it would provide you with the correct bearing, or azimuth, to face for your prayers. It was a brilliant simplification of an otherwise daunting mathematical task. There is, however, an ongoing debate among historians of religion and science about how many ordinary people would have used such a device. These complex calculations and precise observations might have been left to a specialist, the muwaqit, who was the official timekeeper and astronomer for a major mosque. The muwaqit was essentially the mosque's official IT guy for the cosmos, responsible for calculating the prayer times for the entire city and ensuring the call to prayer went out at the proper moment. Some of the most ingenious solutions to the Qibla problem were found in Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain. Here, brilliant innovators developed a type of universal astrolabe called the Shakazia plate. This was a grid that could be used at any latitude, unlike the custom-made tympans. Some of these incredibly rare and complex instruments were designed so that when you aligned them properly, one of the engraved lines on the grid would automatically point in the direction of Mecca. It was a stunning piece of integrated design, a holy compass built right into the fabric of the cosmos. So you can now see the astrolabe not just as a tool for an astronomer or a jewel for a prince, but as a vital instrument for an entire civilization. It was a link between the individual and the divine, a way to order your day and orient your soul according to a celestial plan. 5 times a day, this small brass disc could tell you when to pause and in which direction to turn to connect with the sacred center of your world. It reinforced a worldview where the heavens were not a cold, distant void, but an intimate, meaningful, and orderly part of God's creation, a clockwork of divine precision that you could participate in every single day. It was a clockwork of divine precision that you could participate in every single day. This profound integration of science, art, and faith made the astrolabe the quintessential instrument of the Islamic Golden Age. But knowledge, like water, has a tendency to flow, to seep across borders and find new ground. And while the heart of the Islamic world was in Baghdad and Cairo, its westernmost frontier in Europe was a place of dazzling intellectual light. Al-Andalus, the collection of Muslim states on the Iberian Peninsula. It is here, across the formidable barrier of the Pyrenees Mountains, that the astrolabe would begin its next great journey. The Pyrenees weren't just a physical barrier. For centuries, they acted as a kind of knowledge firewall. On the southern side, in cities like Cordoba, Seville, and Granada, you had magnificent libraries, advanced mathematics, sophisticated medicine, and of course, the astrolabe. On the northern side, in the fledgling Christian kingdoms of Europe, learning was largely confined to monasteries, and scientific knowledge was a pale shadow of its classical past. The astrolabe was like the ultimate software upgrade, and it was about to finally make its way north. Your journey now takes you to this vibrant, contested frontier. Al-Andalus was a complex tapestry of cultures. For centuries, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived in close proximity. Historians of the Reconquista period intensely debate the nature of this cultural exchange, questioning the traditional narrative of a peaceful convivencia, coexistence, and highlighting the complex interplay of collaboration, competition, and conflict between the different faith communities. But whether through peaceful trade or violent conquest, this proximity meant that contact was constant. A Christian monk from a remote Pyrenean monastery might travel south, drawn by rumors of the great libraries of Córdoba, and be stunned by the wealth of knowledge he found there. It would have been like stepping into the future. The single most important conduit for this flow of knowledge was the city of Toledo. When the Christian king Alfonso VI of Castile conquered Toledo in 1085, he didn't burn its libraries. He and his successors recognized the immense intellectual treasure they had captured. Toledo became a magnet for scholars from all across Europe. Men like Gerard of Cremona, an Italian, and Robert of Chester, an Englishman, flocked to the city, not as conquerors but as students. They spearheaded a massive translation effort, a European echo of Baghdad's House of Wisdom, but working in the opposite direction. The goal was to translate the great Arabic works of science, medicine, and philosophy into Latin, the universal language of European scholarship. This was a colossal undertaking. The translators in Toledo were the unsung heroes of the European intellectual awakening. They were like a team localizing the most advanced video game in the world for a brand new market, complete with translating all the technical specs and the entire, complex backstory. The process was often a three-step dance, relying on the unique linguistic skills of the local population. A Jewish scholar, fluent in Arabic and the local Romance dialect, might first translate the Arabic text orally. A Christian scholar would then listen and write down the Latin equivalent. It was a painstaking collaborative process, and mistakes were inevitably made. Translating complex scientific texts was a nightmare. It's like trying to explain quantum physics using only Shakespearean English. Verily, the atom doth possess a curious and fickle spin. You have to invent new words and hope your readers understand the underlying concept. It was through this Toledan translation school that the core texts of Islamic astronomy, and with them, the knowledge of the Astrolabe, entered the European intellectual bloodstream. Treatises by brilliant astronomers like Al-Farghani and Al-Zarqali, who had made significant improvements to the Astrolabe in Spain, were rendered into Latin. For the first time, a scholar in Paris or Oxford could read a detailed manual on how to construct and use this miraculous device. Jewish scholars were particularly vital in this transfer, not just as translators but as active users and innovators. The great 12th century Jewish polymath Abraham ibn Ezra, for instance, traveled widely throughout Europe and wrote one of the first treatises on the Astrolabe in Hebrew, adapting its use for the needs of the Jewish calendar. Imagine being one of those first European scholars to get your hands on a real astrolabe, perhaps brought north from Toledo by a traveling monk. You hold the cool, intricate brass disc. You see the strange, elegant script. You manipulate the rete, watching the stars wheel over the horizon. For a mind accustomed to calculating with a clumsy abacus and telling time with a sundial or a water clock, this device would have seemed like a form of magic. It was a physical manifestation of a level of mathematical and mechanical sophistication that had been lost to much of Europe for 1,000 years. The knowledge had crossed the mountains. The seed of the astrolabe was now planted in Christian soil, ready to grow in unexpected new directions. The seed of the astrolabe was now planted in Christian soil, ready to grow in unexpected new directions. But a seed needs a sower, a dedicated individual to carry it from the fertile ground where it was cultivated and plant it in a new, perhaps less welcoming field. Long before the great translation schools of Toledo began their work in earnest, one of the most brilliant minds of the 10th century made a journey south and returned with a spark of this new knowledge that would help set Europe alight. Your gaze now settles on a young, ferociously intelligent Benedictine monk named Gerbert from the monastery of Aurillac in France. This is the late 900s. Gerbert was the kind of student who exhausts a library. He had quickly mastered the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the limited scientific knowledge available to him, the quadrivium of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. But the astronomy of his day was a pale, theoretical thing. based on crumbling Latin texts that were themselves poor summaries of older Greek ideas. Gerbert was the kid in class who, after learning the basics, immediately asks, "Yes, but how does it work?" The dusty scrolls in his monastery just weren't going to cut it for him. Opportunity came in the form of a visiting Spanish count who was so impressed by the young monk's intellect that he invited Gerbert to travel back with him to the Spanish March, the Christian-controlled buffer zone just south of the Pyrenees. For 3 years, Gerbert studied at the monastery of Santa Maria de Ripoll in Catalonia. While not strictly in Al-Andalus, Ripoll's library had something his French monastery did not: access. Due to its proximity to the great centers of Islamic learning, it held Latin translations of Arabic scientific works that were virtually unknown in the rest of Europe. It was here that Gerbert encountered, for the first time, a level of mathematics and astronomical science that was light years ahead of what he knew. He studied the abacus, an advanced calculating tool at the time, and it is here that he almost certainly encountered the principles, if not a physical example, of the astrolabe. When Gerbert returned to Francia, he was a changed man. He brought with him a body of knowledge that was so advanced, so alien to his contemporaries, that it seemed to them like magic. Imagine being so smart that your friends and colleagues just assume you must be a wizard. It's the ultimate backhanded compliment. "There's no way you figured that out with just math, Gerbert. I saw you consorting with a suspiciously knowledgeable pigeon yesterday." For the rest of his life, and especially after his death, fantastical legends would swirl around him. It was rumored that he had stolen a book of spells from a sorcerer in Spain, that he had built a talking bronze head that could tell the future, and that he had made a pact with a demon to secure his meteoric rise through the church hierarchy. The astrolabe, with its seemingly magical ability to predict the movement of the stars, was seen by some as proof of his occult powers. Historians still debate the depth of Gerbert's direct access to Arabic sources. Did he learn Arabic himself, or did he rely on intermediaries and existing Latin summaries? And to what extent was the knowledge he brought back a full system of astronomy versus a collection of practical techniques? Regardless of the specifics, what he brought back was revolutionary. As the head of the cathedral school in Reims, he became the most famous teacher in Europe. He taught his students how to use the abacus for complex calculations. He constructed celestial globes and armillary spheres to demonstrate the movements of the heavens. He wrote a treatise on the astrolabe, one of the very first in Latin, explaining its construction and use. He was, in essence, rebooting the scientific curriculum of Europe. And then came the most astonishing chapter of his life. Through his intellect, his teaching, and his political skill, this monk of humble origins rose through the ranks of the church until, in the year 999, he was elected pope, taking the name Sylvester II. The most knowledgeable scientist in Christendom was now its spiritual leader. Having Gerbert as pope was like having Stephen Hawking as Archbishop of Canterbury. It sent a powerful message. This Arabic knowledge was not heretical. The study of the heavens using the most advanced tools available was not the work of the devil. It was a legitimate and noble pursuit, a way of understanding God's creation. As Pope, he championed learning and continued to correspond with other scholars on matters of mathematics and astronomy. Gerbert of Aurillac, Pope Sylvester II, was the perfect person to introduce the astrolabe to the heart of Europe. He was not a translator in a remote city, but a teacher of archbishops and a figure of ultimate authority. He didn't just bring back an instrument. He brought back a new way of thinking about the world, a quantitative mathematical approach to understanding the cosmos. He was the great sower. He prepared the intellectual soil of Europe so that when the full flood of knowledge began to pour out of Toledo a century later, there were people ready to receive it, to study it, and to build upon it, all because a curious young monk had once dared to travel south in search of answers. He had held the keys to the kingdom of heaven in one hand and a key to the cosmos in the other. He had held the keys to the kingdom of heaven in one hand and a key to the cosmos in the other. Gerbert's influence legitimized the new science, but for the astrolabe to truly take root in Europe, it needed to find a practical, everyday purpose. The complex needs of Islamic prayer had driven its development in Baghdad and Cordoba. In Christian Europe, it would find its first real job in a remarkably similar environment, the monastery. It was here, behind thick stone walls, that a strict and demanding schedule required a level of timekeeping precision that was difficult to achieve with the simple tools at hand. You are now a monk in a Cluniac monastery in 12th century Burgundy. Your life is governed by the tolling of a bell. The day is divided into 7 canonical hours, the times for communal prayer, from the pre-dawn vigils of matins to the final prayers of Compline after sunset. This is the liturgy of the hours, the divine work that structures your entire existence. Missing a service is not an option, and it is the duty of the sacristan to ensure the bell rings at the correct time, day and night, winter and summer. For a community dedicated to order and discipline, this was a serious responsibility. But how did the sacristan know when to ring? For a long time, the methods were approximate at best. During the day, you had the sundial, but it was useless on a cloudy day and, of course, completely useless at night. At night, you had the stars. You could learn to recognize certain constellations and know that when, say, Orion's belt reached a certain point in the sky as seen through a particular monastery window, it was time to wake the brothers for matins. Some monasteries used water clocks or clepsydras, but these were notoriously unreliable, prone to freezing in the winter and requiring constant recalibration. Others used calibrated candles, burning a set amount for each hour. But a stray draft or an imperfection in the wax could throw the whole schedule off. It was a constant struggle for precision in a world of approximation. Now, into this world of dripping water clocks and sputtering candles comes the astrolabe. For the learned monk, perhaps one who had studied at a new cathedral school in Chartres or Paris where Gerbert's influence was felt, this instrument was a revelation. It solved the problem of nocturnal timekeeping with an elegance and accuracy that must have seemed miraculous. On a clear night, the sacristan could step out into the cloister, lift the cool brass instrument, and take a quick sighting of a known star on the rete, Polaris perhaps, or one of the bright stars in the plough. By performing the simple operations we've discussed, rotating the rete to match the star's measured altitude, he could, in a matter of moments, determine the correct time with an error of only a few minutes. The vague art of watching the stars was replaced by a precise mathematical procedure. But the astrolabe could do more than just tell the current time. It was a planning tool. Historians and manuscript specialists have found texts from this period that are essentially astrolabe instruction manuals written for monks. There is a persistent debate among them, however, about how these instructions were used in practice. Were individual sacristans performing these calculations nightly, or were they used by a single learned monk to create tables of sunrise and prayer times for the entire year? Creating such a table would have been a significant intellectual undertaking, but once done, it would have allowed the monastery to run on a precise, predictable schedule, freeing the sacristan from the need for nightly observations. One of the quirkiest applications of the astrolabe in this context was its use for what was called the unequal hours. In the monastic system, the daytime was always divided into 12 hours, regardless of the season. This meant that a summer daylight hour was much longer than a winter one. Likewise for the night. This seems needlessly complicated to us, used to our standard 60-minute hours, but it had a symbolic, agricultural logic. The astrolabe was perfectly suited to this system. The curved lines engraved on the tympan, the almucantars, could be used to directly read these unequal hours. It's like having a watch that automatically adjusts its speed to fit the season. It's a completely alien way of thinking about time, but one the astrolabe handled natively. The astrolabe, therefore, found a ready and waiting purpose within the Christian monastic tradition. It brought a new level of order and precision to the sacred rhythm of the monastery. Its adoption was a sign that this foreign technology was no longer seen as an occult curiosity associated with sorcerers like Gerbert. It was being sanctified, brought into the service of the church, its gears of brass and bronze meshing perfectly with the spiritual clockwork of the Benedictine rule. The bell in the monastery tower could now ring with a new celestial confidence, its toll regulated not by a dripping bucket, but by the silent, eternal turning of the stars. The bell in the monastery tower could now ring with a new, celestial confidence, its toll regulated not by a dripping bucket, but by the silent, eternal turning of the stars. The astrolabe had found its place in the rhythmic, ordered world of the church. But this powerful instrument was destined for a wider audience. Knowledge, once introduced, rarely stays confined to one group. As the Middle Ages waned and a new, more secular learning began to blossom in the cities of Europe, the astrolabe was about to leave the cloister and enter the home. Your journey now takes you to the teeming, muddy, vibrant streets of late 14th century London. And here we meet a man you probably know, but perhaps not in this context. You see Geoffrey Chaucer not with a poet's quill in his hand, but with an astrolabe. We remember him as the father of English literature, the masterful author of the Canterbury Tales. But Chaucer was no isolated wordsmith. He was a man of the world, a soldier, a diplomat, the controller of customs for the port of London, and a passionate amateur astronomer. He was part of a growing class of educated laymen who were literate, intellectually curious, and engaged with the practical sciences. In the year 1391, Chaucer set aside his poetry to work on a very different kind of text. It wasn't a story of pilgrims on the road to Canterbury. It was a practical instruction manual. He called it simply a treatise on the astrolabe. What makes this work so remarkable and so deeply charming is the person he wrote it for, his 10-year-old son, Lewis. Writing a technical manual for a 10-year-old is a bold move. Most of us can barely get a kid to assemble a piece of furniture following the instructions. Chaucer aimed just a little higher. All right, Lewis, forget your toys. Today we are going to build a working model of the known universe. Try to keep up. This personal fatherly motivation suffuses the entire work. In his introduction, Chaucer speaks directly to his son with a touching tenderness. He explains that he has seen treatises on the astrolabe in Latin, but they are too complex. And besides, Latine canst thou yet but small, my light son, for you still know but little Latin, my little son. So, he says, he will explain it all in simple English, with the bare words, so that Lewis can learn to use this noble instrument. Chaucer scholars and historians of science continue to debate the identity of little Lewis, and whether he was a real son of Chaucer's or a useful literary fiction, a stand-in for any young, curious English student. The consensus leans toward him being real. But either way, the choice to frame it as a lesson from a father to a son is a brilliant pedagogical move. The decision to write in Middle English was, in itself, a revolutionary act. For centuries, Latin had been the impenetrable fortress of serious scholarship. Any text on a scientific subject was, by default, written in Latin, making it accessible only to priests, monks, and university men. Writing a science textbook in English was a profoundly democratizing gesture. It was like a top-tier university professor deciding to post their advanced physics lectures on YouTube for free. The academic establishment probably clutched their pearls and muttered about the decline of standards. But Chaucer was opening a door, asserting that the English language was just as capable of expressing complex scientific ideas as Latin was. The treatise itself is a model of clarity. It's a plain language user's guide. The first part is a detailed description of the astrolabe itself, naming all the parts in English: the ring, the mater, the rule, the rete, which he calls the spider, and explaining what they are. The second and main part of the work is a series of 40 conclusions, which is to say, problems you can solve with the instrument. It's a list of practical applications, starting with the simplest, like to find the degree of the sun on any day, and moving on to more complex tasks, like to know the hour of the day by day. Each conclusion is a clear, step-by-step recipe for using the astrolabe. Curiously, the work as we have it is incomplete. Chaucer seems to have planned at least 3 more parts, which would have covered more advanced material, including the underlying astronomical theory, tables of data, and uses for astrology. For whatever reason, he never finished it. It's one of history's great unfinished homework assignments. Perhaps the demands of his job or his more famous literary works took precedence. It's an oddly relatable situation. You know what? The spherical trigonometry section is giving me a headache, and I have a really great idea for a story about a miller. And thus, we are left with a perfect beginner's guide, a snapshot of a brilliant father's desire to share his passion for the cosmos with his child. The Astrolabe had found a new voice and a new home. The Astrolabe had found a new voice and a new home. Chaucer's treatise signaled its arrival as a tool for the educated English gentleman. But this versatile instrument was about to be pressed into service in a new, far more demanding environment. As Europe's ambitions began to turn outward toward the vast, uncharted waters of the Atlantic, its sailors and navigators needed new tools. They needed a way to find their position on an empty ocean, and the delicate, scholarly Astrolabe was not going to survive the journey. You are now standing on the spray-slicked deck of a Portuguese caravel, sometime in the late 15th century. The ship pitches and rolls on the endless blue swells. The only sounds are the creak of the timber, the snap of the sails in the wind, and the cry of a distant gull. You are out of sight of land, a tiny speck of wood and humanity in a world of water and sky. Your most pressing question, the one that gnaws at you day and night, is not what time is it, but where on earth are we? Specifically, how far north or south of home have we traveled? You need to find your latitude. You reach for your Astrolabe, but it's not the beautiful, complex disk we've been examining. The classical planispheric Astrolabe, with its intricate rete and delicate tympans, would be worse than useless out here. The wind would catch its solid body like a sail, sending it spinning. The fine web-like rete would snag on a rope or be damaged in a storm, and most of its functions were simply unnecessary. A sailor doesn't need to know the time for afternoon prayers. He needs to know his position on the globe. So, the instrument was radically redesigned for this one overriding purpose. The result is the mariner's Astrolabe. The mariner's Astrolabe is what you'd get if you asked a ship's carpenter to build you a laptop. It's incredibly heavy, has only one function, and all the delicate, unnecessary parts have been removed. It is the Astrolabe's brutish, hard-working cousin. It's not a solid disc, but a heavy ring of bronze or cast iron, often weighing several pounds. The body is reduced to a skeletal frame, with large openings that allow the wind to pass through, making it more stable in a gale. There is no intricate rete, no delicate tympan. It has been stripped down to its bare essentials, a heavy, graduated circle for measuring angles, and a rotating sighting rule, the alidade. Its sole job is to measure the altitude of a celestial body above the horizon. Its use was a masterclass in difficult practical skill. Maritime historians and archaeologists still debate how quickly the mariner's Astrolabe was adopted by common sailors, or if it remained a specialist tool used only by the ship's master or pilot, with most navigation still being done by traditional dead reckoning. Whoever used it, the task was not easy. To measure the sun's altitude at noon, which was the most common way to find latitude, was often a two-man job. One navigator, bracing himself against the roll of the ship, would hold the instrument by its ring, letting its immense weight pull it into a true vertical. The other would crouch, moving the alidade. You would never look directly at the sun, a sure way to blind yourself. Instead, you would adjust the alidade until the sun's ray passed through the pinhole on the upper vein and cast a single brilliant speck of light directly onto the lower vein. Trying to hold that speck of light steady while the ship heaved beneath you was an incredible challenge. It was a full-body workout and an exercise in extreme patience. It's probably why all those old sea captains look so grim in their portraits. They'd just spent an hour being splashed with cold seawater while trying to aim a heavy metal ring at the sun. These instruments were workhorses, not showpieces. Some of the most compelling examples we have today were recovered from shipwrecks like the Sodre Astrolabe, found in the wreck of a ship from Vasco da Gama's fleet that sank in 1503. Pulled from the seabed after 5 centuries, it is a simple, solid disc, its markings still vaguely visible, a tangible link to the dawn of the Age of Discovery. This was the key that unlocked the oceans. By allowing a navigator to determine his latitude with a reasonable degree of accuracy, the mariner's Astrolabe gave him the confidence to sail west into the open Atlantic, or south along the coast of Africa, knowing he could find his way back by sailing to the correct latitude and then turning east or west. It was the tool that powered the voyages of Columbus, da Gama, and Magellan. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't versatile, but its rugged, stripped-down simplicity changed the world. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't versatile, but its rugged, stripped-down simplicity changed the world. Now, let's leave the storm-tossed deck of the caravel and return to solid ground, to a quiet courtyard on a clear, calm night. The mariner's astrolabe has shown us the instrument in its most basic form. For the next few sections, we're going to put aside the history and focus on the practice. You are going to learn how to use the classic planispheric astrolabe, the beautiful complex device we first met. You have the instrument in your hand. The theory is understood. The history is appreciated. Now it's time to actually use it, to grasp the stars. The first and most fundamental operation, the one upon which almost all others depend, is to take a sighting. You need to measure the altitude of a celestial object, its height in the sky, measured in degrees above the horizon. Think of the horizon as 0 degrees, and the point directly over your head, the zenith, as 90 degrees. Your goal is to find out where a particular star or the sun sits on that scale. This is the primary data you will feed into your celestial computer. To do this, you will use the back of the astrolabe. You hold the instrument up by its ring, letting its own weight pull it into a perfect vertical position. It's important that it hangs freely. If you grip the body of the astrolabe, you'll tilt it, and your measurement will be inaccurate. This is why the ring and throne are so robust. The entire instrument is designed to hang from this single point. On the back of the mater, you'll see that the outer edge is marked with a scale of degrees, usually divided into 4 quadrants of 90 degrees each. This is your protractor for the sky. Mounted at the center is the alidade, a rotating ruler with a small, pierced vein at each end. This is your sighting tool. Let's say you want to measure the altitude of a bright, familiar star. You spot Polaris, the North Star, a steadfast point of light in the northern sky. You lift the astrolabe to eye level, letting it hang straight down. Now, you rotate the alidade while looking along its length. Your goal is to align it so that you can see the star perfectly through the small pinholes in both veins. You squint with one eye, peering through the hole in the vein closest to you, and adjust the alidade until the starlight from Polaris shines directly through the hole in the far vein as well. It's like lining up the iron sights on a rifle. You're not just pointing the ruler at the star, you're ensuring your line of sight is perfectly straight and true. It takes a moment. Your hand needs to be steady, your eye focused. A slight waver and the star disappears from the tiny aperture. But then you find it. A brilliant pinprick of ancient light shines through both holes. You hold it there, steady, for a second. Now, without moving the alidade, you can lower the instrument and look at it. The pointed end of the alidade now lies against the degree scale on the edge of the mater. You read the number. Let's say the pointer indicates 45 degrees. You have just successfully taken a sighting. You have measured the altitude of Polaris. You have captured your first piece of raw data from the cosmos. You have, in the truest sense of the word, taken a star. The process for the sun is similar, but with one crucial difference. You must never ever look directly at the sun through the pinholes. Doing so would cause serious permanent eye damage. The old masters were well aware of this. Instead, you use the sun's own light. You hold the astrolabe so that the sun is shining on it, and you adjust the alidade not by looking through it, but by watching the shadow it casts. You move the alidade until the ray of sunlight passing through the hole on the upper vein falls precisely on the hole of the lower vein. You'll see a single bright spot of light appear. When it's perfectly aligned, you have your measurement. This simple act is the gateway to everything else the astrolabe can do. It's the handshake between you and the universe. The moment you translate a physical reality, the position of a star, into a numerical value that your instrument can understand. It's a moment of profound connection, a skill shared by centuries of astronomers, navigators, and scholars. You've done it. You have the first piece of the puzzle. Now, it's time to see what you can do with it. You have the first piece of the puzzle. You have successfully translated a point of light in the sky into a number, 45 degrees. Now it's time to see what you can do with it. You flip the astrolabe over in your hand. The back was for gathering data. The front is for computation. You are looking at the face of the instrument, that beautiful, intricate combination of the fixed tympan plate and the rotating, web-like rete. This is your user interface. Your first task is to find your collaborators in this process. You need to identify the star you just measured on the REIT's star map. You scan the elegant flame-shaped pointers until you find the one engraved with the name Polaris. It's usually located close to the center pin, as the North Star sits very near the celestial pole. There it is, a tiny sharp point of brass, representing the real thing. Next, you need to find your data point on the tympan, the stationary plate underneath. The tympan, you'll remember, is a map of your local sky, and the series of concentric circles etched onto it are lines of equal altitude. These lines are called almucantars, a wonderful word that, like so much of our astronomical vocabulary, comes to us from Arabic. They look like the contour lines on a topographical map of the sky. You trace them with your finger, starting from the horizon at 0 degrees, moving inwards and upwards towards the zenith at the center. You find the circle marked 45. Now comes the crucial, magical step. This is the moment you synchronize your handheld model with the cosmos itself. You gently push the REIT with your thumb, causing it to rotate over the fixed tympan. You turn it slowly, carefully, until the very tip of the Polaris pointer lies exactly, perfectly, on top of the 45-degree almucantar circle. You have just told your astrolabe, the star Polaris is currently at an altitude of 45 degrees in my sky. The instrument now has the one piece of real-world, real-time information it needs. By making this one physical alignment, you have fixed the position of the entire REIT, and in doing so, you have created a complete snapshot of the entire sky at this exact moment. All the other star pointers on the REIT are now in their correct positions relative to your local horizon. You can see which stars are rising in the east, which are setting in the west, and which are high overhead. This step is like logging into the universe. The star and its altitude are your username and password. You find the pointer, you find the line, you turn the REIT until they match, and you're in. You now have administrative access to the current celestial moment. Please try not to delete any constellations. There is, of course, a certain amount of skill involved. There is some debate among historians of instruments about the practical accuracy of this step. Given the thickness of the engraved lines and the potential for parallax error when looking at the REIT from an angle, how precise could this alignment truly be in the hands of a typical user? Getting the pointer to sit exactly on the line is key. A small error here will cascade into an error in your final result. It's a very unforgiving interface. The beauty of this system was its sheer ingenuity. The desire to create a mechanical model of the heavens was so powerful that it even jumped from handheld instruments to architecture. In late medieval Europe, a new marvel appeared, the astronomical clock. Immense, complex clocks like the famous one in Prague were essentially giant, automated astrolabes. The clock's face was a massive tympan and a rotating rete, driven by a complex system of gears and weights instead of a human thumb. They were a public, monumental celebration of this ability to model the cosmos, showing the time, the date, the position of the sun and moon, and major saints' days, all in one glorious, ticking display. You look down at the astrolabe in your hand. The rete is now set. It is no longer just a generic map of the stars, it is a map of the stars right now. The dance of metal in your hand is perfectly in step with the grand dance of the heavens above your head. The machine is primed. The data has been entered. The calculation is, in a sense, already complete, contained in the new position of all the components. You are now ready to read the result. You are now ready to read the result. The instrument in your hand is a perfect, synchronized model of the sky. All that work, sighting the star, finding the pointer, rotating the rate to the correct altitude, it all comes down to this final, beautifully simple step. It's like solving a complex cosmic puzzle, and reading the time is the final, satisfying answer. To get there, you need the last moving piece of the astrolabe, the one we've mostly ignored until now. The rule. The rule, or regula in Latin, is the simplest looking part of the whole assembly. It's a slender, straight bar, often with beveled edges, that sits on top of the rete and pivots around the same central pin. It has no complex markings of its own. Its only job is to be a pointer, a clear straight line to carry a position from the center of the instrument out to the very edge. You now take this rule and prepare for the final alignment. Your goal is to find the local solar time. Time, by its very definition in this era, is based on the position of the sun. Even though you used a star to set the instrument, the final answer must relate back to the sun. To find the sun, you turn your attention back to the rete and its most prominent feature, the off-center ecliptic circle, the one marked with the signs of the zodiac. You need to know where the sun is on this path today. You might know this from memory, or you can flip the astrolabe over one last time to consult the circular calendar on the back. You find today's date, let's say it's October 30th, and the calendar shows you that on this day, the sun is at approximately 7 degrees into the constellation of Scorpio. Now you turn back to the front. You look at the ecliptic circle on the rete and find the mark for 7 degrees Scorpio. Now you rotate the rule until its straight edge passes directly over this point on the ecliptic. Be precise. The edge of the rule now acts as a line, connecting the center of the astrolabe, the sun's current position in the zodiac, and the outer rim of the instrument. And it is there on that outer rim, the limb, that your answer is waiting. The limb of the matter is engraved with a 24-hour scale. You simply look where the tip of the rule is pointing, and there it is. The rule indicates that it is 2 o'clock in the morning. You have your answer. The universe itself just told you it's 2 a.m. You now have precisely zero excuse for being late to wake the other monks for matins. The entire complex operation has gracefully concluded. You took the altitude of a star, used it to set a map of the heavens, and then used a pointer to find the corresponding position of the sun against a time scale. You have successfully asked the cosmos, "What time is it?" And it has answered. There is a subtle but interesting debate among specialists about what kind of time these instruments were really keeping. Was it local solar time, which changes as you travel east or west? Or were there attempts to standardize time based on the meridian of a major city like Toledo? For most users, this was a non-issue. The astrolabe was a local device, but it highlights how different their conception of time was from our modern, globalized and rigidly standardized system. Indeed, many early Islamic and European astrolabes were marked not with the 24 equal hours we use, but with the 12 unequal or seasonal hours for both day and night, which the instrument could also calculate with ease. The astrolabe was a bundle of functions, and timekeeping was only one of them. While you have the back of the instrument in mind, you might notice another feature: a grid of lines in one of the lower quadrants. This is the shadow square. This little grid was the astrolabe's surveying tool. It basically let you find the height of a building without the undignified and often dangerous business of climbing it with a long rope. By sighting the top of a tower with the alidade and noting where the pointer fell on the shadow square S grid, you could use a simple ratio to determine its height if you knew your distance from its base. It was a pocket calculator for trigonometry, a practical tool for being professionally nosy about the height of your neighbor's castle. But for now, the nocturnal clock has done its job. The process, which seems so complex when described, becomes fluid and intuitive with practice. Hold, sight, read, flip, find, rotate, align, read. It is a ritual, a quiet conversation in a language of angles and brass. You have taken a piece of the vast, silent, and mysterious night sky and translated it into a simple, human, and useful fact. You have taken a piece of the vast, silent, and mysterious night sky and translated it into a simple, human, and useful fact. The darkness holds no more secrets of the hour from you. But the night fades, the stars dissolve into the brightening blue of the dawn, and a new celestial object takes command of the sky. The sun is now high, a brilliant, warmth-giving disk. The challenge remains the same. What time is it? Your astrolabe, having served you so well in the dark, is just as ready to answer in the light. The principle is exactly the same, but the practice differs in a few crucial ways. You begin, once again, by taking a sighting to measure altitude. You hold the astrolabe by its ring, letting it hang vertically. But this time, as we've discussed, you do not squint through the alidade's pinholes. You are not trying to capture a faint point of starlight. You are working with the overwhelming power of the sun. Using the sun to tell time feels like the universe is finally being helpful. Oh, you need the time? Here's a gigantic, unbelievably bright clock. Just please do not stare directly at me. I cannot be held responsible for the consequences. You hold the instrument at arm's length, angled so the sunlight falls upon it, and you adjust the alidade until that single sharp point of light from the upper vein falls perfectly centered on the lower one. You check the scale on the back. The sun's altitude is 30 degrees. Now you flip the instrument over to its face. At night, your next step was to find the pointer for the specific star you measured. But the sun, in its majestic daily and annual journey, is a moving target. It has no fixed pointer on the rete because its position relative to the background stars changes every single day. So, you must first determine the sun's current address on the celestial map. You need to find its position on the ecliptic circle. Once again, you might consult the calendar on the back. You find today's date. Let's say it is May 15th. The scale tells you that on this day, the sun resides at the 24th degree of the sign of Taurus. Finding the sun's place in the zodiac is like checking its celestial address for the day. Let's see. Today the sun is hanging out over at 24 Taurus Lane. He's a bit of a homebody in the spring. This zodiacal system, so familiar to us from horoscopes, is in fact a remnant of an incredibly ancient astronomical coordinate system, first developed by the Babylonians thousands of years ago. The astrolabe is a physical embodiment of this immense unbroken chain of knowledge. Now you look at the ecliptic circle on the rete and find the sign of Taurus. You follow its scale until you find the mark for 24 degrees. This exact spot on the metal ring is your target. This is the sun. The next step is the familiar, satisfying alignment. You rotate the rete until that specific point, the 24th degree, of Taurus on the ecliptic, lies perfectly on the 30-degree Almacantar circle on the tympan below. You have now synchronized your astrolabe. You have told it. The sun, which I know to be at this point in the zodiac, is currently at an altitude of 30 degrees in my sky. The rete clicks into a position that represents this moment in time. Historians of science debate the relative importance of nocturnal versus diurnal timekeeping for astrolabe users. While daytime use seems more straightforward and broadly useful, some argue the astrolabe's killer app was its unique ability to tell time accurately at night. A far more challenging problem in the pre-mechanical era, but its dual-purpose nature was undoubtedly a key to its long-lasting success. It was a complete 24-hour solution. With the rete set, the final step is a mirror of the nocturnal process. You take the rule and pivot it until its edge lies directly over the sun's position, that same spot at 24 degrees of Taurus on the ecliptic. You look to where the tip of the rule now points on the 24-hour scale engraved on the limb. It indicates the 10th hour. It is 10 a.m. The process is complete. The logic is symmetrical, a beautiful echo of the method you used in the dark. Whether by the faint light of a distant star or the brilliant glare of our own, the principles of celestial motion, when modeled on this brass computer, yield the same simple answer to your question. You have now truly mastered the core function of this noble instrument, becoming a timekeeper by both day and night. You have now truly mastered the core function of this noble instrument, becoming a timekeeper by both day and night. But to the mind of a medieval or Renaissance scholar, knowing the time was often just the first step. The real question was not, what time is it, but what does this time mean? You now delve deeper into the astrolabe's other, and arguably more influential, purpose, its role as a calculator for casting fates and fortunes. For in this world, astronomy and astrology were not separate disciplines. They were intimately and inextricably linked. To us, the line is sharp and clear. Astronomy is a science. Astrology is a pseudoscience. But for the people who made and used these instruments, the distinction was far more blurry. Astronomy was the practical art of measuring the positions and movements of the heavens, the what, where, and when. Astrology was the philosophical art of interpreting what those positions and movements signified for life on Earth, the why and the so what. An astronomer who couldn't also cast a horoscope was seen as a mere technician, a craftsman who knew how to use the tools but didn't understand the deeper purpose. The great Claudius Ptolemy, whose astronomical work in the Almagest was the foundation of the science for 400 years, was also the author of the Tetrabiblos, the single most influential textbook on astrology ever written. The two pursuits were seen as a unified whole. The astrolabe, being a perfect model of the heavens, was therefore the ideal astrologer's tool. Its primary use was in casting a horoscope, which is nothing more than a map of the sky at a specific, crucial moment, most often the moment of a person's birth. To do this, you would first need the exact time and date of the birth. You would then use the astrolabe to set the rete for that precise instant, exactly as you learned to do for telling time. The face of the astrolabe, with the rete locked in position, now becomes a perfect snapshot of the celestial situation at the moment the person took their first breath. From here, the astrologer would look for key information. First and foremost was the ascendant, which is the sign of the zodiac that was rising on the eastern horizon at the moment of birth. With the rete set, you simply had to look at the eastern side of the horizon line on your tympan and see which part of the ecliptic circle was crossing it. That was your rising sign. Next, you would look for the midheaven, the highest point in the sky. This was also easy to see on the astrolabe. This framework of the ascendant and midheaven was used to divide the sky into 12 astrological houses, each governing a different aspect of life: wealth, family, health, career, and so on. Many astrolabes made this even simpler by having the lines for the unequal houses engraved directly on the tympan plate. Casting a horoscope with an astrolabe was the original character creation screen. All right, born at this time, we'll put the moon in the second house of possessions and Jupiter in the 10th house of career. You're destined to be a prosperous and well-liked leader. Next, historians of science and culture continue to debate the true nature of belief in astrology among the educated elite. Was it a deeply held scientific conviction about celestial influence, a form of pious natural philosophy, or a sophisticated political and psychological tool used by rulers to justify their actions and project an aura of destiny? The answer is likely all of the above. Rulers and popes employed court astrologers not just to read birth charts, but for a branch called electional astrology, the art of choosing the most auspicious time to begin an enterprise. A general would consult his astrologer to determine the perfect moment to launch an attack, waiting for Mars to be in a powerful position. A king would ask for the ideal time to be crowned, or to sign a treaty, or even to lay the foundation stone of a new cathedral, ensuring the project would be blessed by the heavens. It was the ultimate form of cosmic planning. Sorry, can't sign the peace accord today. My horoscope says it's a terrible day for making binding agreements. How's Thursday? The astrolabe was the pocket calculator that made all of this possible. It allowed the astrologer to quickly model different times and dates, to fast forward the sky and find the configuration he was looking for. It was a tool that bridged the mathematical and the mystical, the observable and the interpretable. It gave a sense of order, meaning, and predictability to the chaotic and often terrifying randomness of human existence. It reinforced a worldview in which everything was connected, where the grand clockwork of the heavens above was intimately linked to the smallest details of a human life below. The astrolabe was not just a clock. For many of its users, it was a map of fate itself. The astrolabe was not just a clock. For many of its users, it was a map of fate itself. It was the product of a world where human time was intimately bound to celestial time, a conversation between the microcosm of human life and the macrocosm of the universe. But now, in the bustling cities of late medieval Europe, you begin to hear a new sound. It's not the call to prayer or the gentle ringing of a monastery bell. It is a loud, relentless, and profoundly regular sound, the clang of a great iron hammer striking a bell in a tall civic tower. It is the sound of the mechanical clock, and it marks the beginning of a revolution in the very way we conceive of time. This new machine was, in its own way, as miraculous as the astrolabe. The first great public clocks, which began appearing in the towers of Italian and German cities in the 14th century, were marvels of engineering. They were huge, room-sized machines made of iron gears and levers, driven by the slow, steady pull of massive weights. The technological heart of these early clocks was a brilliant invention called the verge escapement. This clever mechanism was the first to successfully translate the continuous downward pull of a weight into a periodic, oscillating, tick-tock motion that could be used to regulate the movement of a clock's hands. The first mechanical clocks were not subtle. They didn't gently chime. They clanged and banged like a workshop full of angry blacksmiths. Punctuality was a loud and aggressive new idea. The mechanical clock represented a fundamentally different approach to time. The astrolabe is an observational instrument. It finds the time by taking a measurement of a natural external source, the sky. The clock is a generative instrument. It creates the time through its own internal artificial mechanism. And in this difference lies the secret of the clock's eventual triumph. Its convenience was simply unbeatable. The astrolabe requires a clear sky. The clock works in a rainstorm. The astrolabe requires you to go outside. The clock can be read from your window. The astrolabe requires a skilled user who understands its principles. The clock requires only that you know how to count. It was the fast food of horology. Less intellectually nutritious, perhaps, but so much easier for the average person. This new device also promoted a new kind of time. The astrolabe was perfectly suited to the flexible, seasonal time of the ancient world, the unequal hours that stretched and shrank with the seasons. The clock, by its very mechanical nature, was not. Its ticks were regular, its hours were equal. An hour in the dead of winter was exactly as long as an hour in the height of summer. This was the time of the merchant, the lawyer, the city council. It was an abstract, standardized and linear time, divorced from the natural rhythms of the sun. Sociologists and historians of technology have long debated whether the mechanical clock was a result of the needs of a rising capitalist society, or if the clock itself was a primary cause of that new mindset, by creating a culture of punctuality, efficiency, and synchronized labor. Whatever the cause, the clock didn't care if the sun was high or low. An hour was an hour. It is the spiritual ancestor of the 9-to-5 workday, and the meeting that should have been an email. For a century or two, the astrolabe and the clock were not rivals, but partners. The early mechanical clocks were notoriously inaccurate, often losing or gaining many minutes in a single day. The astrolabe, drawing its information directly from the unerringly regular heavens, became the gold standard. It was the tool you used to set your town clock. A learned astronomer would take a precise solar reading with his astrolabe and then inform the clockkeeper that the town's mechanical beast was running fast or slow. The astrolabe was the master, the clock its noisy, often unreliable servant. But technology relentlessly improves. As clockmakers became more skilled, their creations became smaller and more accurate. The invention of the mainspring in the 15th century allowed for the creation of portable clocks, freeing them from the need for giant weights. This led to domestic clocks and eventually the pocket watch. A wealthy Renaissance man who, a century earlier, would have demonstrated his sophistication with a fine brass astrolabe, might now carry a stunningly ornate personal timepiece. Some of the earliest and most expensive watches even featured astrolabe-like dials, a clear nod to the older, more prestigious instrument. But the underlying mechanism was the relentless, convenient tick-tock of the new age. The astrolabe was still the undisputed king for the astronomer, the astrologer, and the navigator. But for the simple, everyday question of, what time is it? Its reign was slowly coming to an end. The astrolabe was still the undisputed king for the astronomer, the astrologer, and the navigator. But for the simple, everyday question of, what time is it? Its reign was slowly coming to an end. The relentless, convenient ticking of the mechanical clock had conquered the domain of time. But the astrolabe had other functions. It was still the primary tool for observing the heavens, for taking the measure of the stars. In this, at least, it remained supreme. But another invention was coming, a simple tube of glass and metal that would not just challenge the astrolabe, but would shatter the very universe it was built to model. You are now in Padua, Italy, in the year 1609. The world is buzzing with news of a curious Dutch invention, a spyglass that uses lenses to make distant objects appear closer. It was initially a novelty, a toy for the rich or a tool for merchants to spot incoming ships. The telescope was invented by accident, basically as a fun way to look at things far away. It took a genius like Galileo Galilei to hear of this device and think, forget ships and enemy armies. I'm going to point this at the moon. In that moment, the fate of the astrolabe and of the entire ancient cosmos was sealed. You look through the eyepiece of Galileo's crude, handmade telescope. The image is blurry, tinged with false color at the edges. But what you see is revolutionary. You look at the moon. In the worldview inherited from Aristotle and Ptolemy, the one the astrolabe so perfectly represents, the heavens were made of a perfect ethereal substance. Celestial bodies were flawless spheres. But the moon you see through this lens is not a perfect sphere. It is a world. It has mountains that cast long, sharp shadows across its surface. It has vast, dark plains that you might mistake for seas. It is rough, imperfect, and looks startlingly like the Earth. Then you turn the telescope to the planet Jupiter. To the naked eye, it is a bright, wandering star. But through the telescope, you see it is a distinct disk, and next to it are 4 tiny, new stars, invisible to the naked eye, arranged in a neat little line. You watch for another night, and the tiny stars have moved. They are not background stars. They are moons, orbiting Jupiter. This was a profound, system-shattering discovery. The old model said that everything in the universe must orbit the Earth. Here was direct, irrefutable proof that some things, at least, orbited something else. Galileo pointing his telescope at the sky was the scientific equivalent of flicking on the lights after a party, and discovering the room is 1,000,000 times larger than you thought, filled with wonders you never imagined, and by the way, you're not standing in the center. The astrolabe was a tool of the naked eye universe. Its rete marked the positions of the brightest stars that a human could see. The telescope revealed a cosmos that was teeming with countless stars too faint for the eye to perceive. The frontier of astronomy had, in an instant, moved beyond the reach of the astrolabe. It wasn't just a matter of seeing new things, it was about measuring more accurately. When a telescope was mounted on a large, carefully graduated circle, it became a measuring tool of unprecedented power. An astronomer could now measure the angular distance between stars with a precision that made the astrolabe's simple alidade look like a blunt instrument. The scientific need for the astrolabe as an observational device simply evaporated. Historians of astronomy debate whether the revolution was primarily driven by the new data from the telescope, or if the theoretical groundwork laid by Copernicus and Kepler had already fatally weakened the Ptolemaic model, with the telescope merely providing the final, dramatic confirmation. Either way, the result was the same. The astrolabe was a geocentric instrument at its very core. Its beautiful stereographic projection was a map of the celestial sphere with the Earth at its center. The new telescopic evidence pointed overwhelmingly to a sun-centered system. The astrolabe was a perfect model of a cosmos that was now proven to be wrong. Interestingly, Galileo was not the first person to point a telescope at the sky. That honor likely belongs to an English astronomer and cartographer named Thomas Harriot, who observed and drew a map of the moon through a telescope several months before Galileo did. But Harriot, for a variety of complex reasons, did not publish or publicize his findings. Galileo, a master of self-promotion, did, and so the revolution bears his name. The astrolabe, once the pinnacle of high technology, had suddenly become a flip phone in the age of the iPhone. It was still a beautiful object, a testament to the genius of its creators, but the science it served had moved on to a vaster, stranger, and more wonderful universe than it could ever hope to model. The astrolabe was a perfect model of a cosmos that was now proven to be wrong. The clock and the telescope, the twin engines of a new scientific age, had rendered it obsolete. Its long and brilliant career as a cutting-edge scientific instrument was over. But when an object is made with such genius, such skill, and such beauty, it does not simply disappear. It transforms. It enters a new life, not as a tool, but as a treasure. You are now walking through the quiet, climate-controlled galleries of a great museum. Perhaps it is the Museum of the History of Science in Oxford, which holds one of the world's finest collections, or the British Museum in London, or the Louvre in Paris. The air is still. The light is low and focused. All around you are the ghosts of science past, strange glass tubes, polished brass microscopes, and elegant ivory rulers. And there, in a glass case, resting on a simple velvet stand, is an astrolabe. It is no longer in your hand. It is an artifact, separated from you by a pane of glass and the weight of centuries. The Astrolabe has now officially retired. It's gone from being a pocket computer to a beautiful antique that spends its days under soft lighting. It's the scientific instrument equivalent of a silent film star. Glamorous, silent, and from another time entirely. Its value has shifted. No one acquires an astrolabe today to find the time or cast a horoscope. They acquire it for its history, its artistry, and its immense intellectual weight. It is a trophy, a tangible piece of the human quest for knowledge. You gaze at one of the most famous surviving Islamic astrolabes, made in Isfahan in the 18th century for a Safavid ruler, Shah Sultan Hussein. It is a masterpiece of late Persian metalwork, every surface covered in exquisite calligraphy and floral engravings. It was made long after the telescope had changed astronomy, a clear sign that the astrolabe persisted as a symbol of royal learning and sophisticated taste. It is an object of power, meant to be admired, not used. Museum curators and historians of science frequently debate the best way to display these objects. Should they be presented as works of art, focusing on their beauty and craftsmanship, or as scientific instruments with complex diagrams and explanations of their functions? How do you balance these two identities in a single exhibit? Seeing an astrolabe in a museum case is a bit bittersweet. Part of you wants to reach through the glass, to feel the cool weight of the brass, to turn the rate and watch the stars move. But a very stern-looking guard and a sheet of very thick, alarm-protected glass are there to remind you that this is the ultimate look, don't touch situation. The finest examples are now priceless jewels of cultural heritage. They are given names and have their pedigrees traced like royalty. The astrolabe made by Khalaf ibn al-Malayib in the 11th century, with its unique geared calendar mechanism on the back, is a world-famous treasure. The sparse, elegant instruments signed by the great 10th century craftsman Nastylus are among the earliest and most sought after. When these objects occasionally appear on the high-end art market, they command astonishing prices, selling for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. They are fought over by museums and private collectors, each eager to own a piece of this extraordinary legacy. This high value has inevitably led to a curious modern problem: forgery. Because the principles of the astrolabe are well understood, and the potential reward is so great, a small but skilled group of forgers has been known to create fake antique astrolabes. Detecting them is a fascinating science in itself. Experts must analyze the chemical composition of the brass alloy, the style of the calligraphy, the tooling marks left by the engraver, and even the astronomical data. A good forgery might look the part, but a great expert might notice that the star positions on the rete are accurate for the 21st century, not the 13th due to that old friend precession. Imagine spending a fortune on a medieval masterpiece only to find out the craftsman used a star chart he downloaded from the internet. You press your hands to the cool glass of the display case. The astrolabe within is silent, its work done. It no longer tells the time or predicts the future. Instead, it tells a story of Greek ingenuity, of Islamic genius, of European curiosity. It is a testament to a time when art and science were one, and when the entire cosmos could be held, quite literally, in the palm of a human hand. It is a testament to a time when art and science were one, and when the entire cosmos could be held, quite literally, in the palm of a human hand. For most historical objects, this is where the story ends. Admired, studied, but ultimately silent and still behind glass. But the astrolabe is different. Its blend of mathematical elegance, tangible beauty, and profound purpose is so compelling that some people are not content to simply look. They feel an overwhelming urge to bring it back to life. You are no longer in a quiet museum, but in a small, modern workshop. The air smells of machine oil and hot metal, but also of sawdust and old books. On one bench, a laptop displays a complex web of lines, a stereographic projection generated by specialized software. Next to it, a computer-controlled milling machine is patiently, precisely engraving those lines onto a fresh disc of brass. On another bench, however, a craftsman is hunched over a different disc, carefully cutting the same lines by hand with a traditional burin, just as his predecessors did 1,000 years ago. The astrolabe is not dead. it is being reborn. A vibrant and passionate community of historians, artists, educators, and dedicated amateurs is in the midst of a quiet astrolabe revival. For a historian of science, building a replica is a form of experimental archaeology. By attempting to recreate the object using period-appropriate techniques, you gain a far deeper appreciation for the skill and knowledge of the original makers. It's one thing to read about stereographic projection. It's another thing entirely to try and lay it out on a metal plate with a compass and a ruler. Within this revivalist community, there's a friendly but persistent debate about authenticity. Does a CNC milled astrolabe, though perfectly functional and mathematically flawless, lose the soul of a hand-engraved instrument? Does using modern software to do the complex calculations in seconds count as cheating? A medieval astrolabist would probably be both amazed and deeply offended by a modern workshop. You're telling me that a robot carved this perfectly in 15 minutes? It took me 6 weeks, and my eyesight was never the same again. This modern revival of interest in historical scientific instruments is a relatively recent field, pioneered by figures like the mid-20th century historian Derek de Solla Price, whose work showed that the only way to truly understand ancient technology was to try and understand how it was made and what it could do. This hands-on approach has rescued countless old techniques from being forgotten. There's a certain type of person who looks at an incredibly complex object from the past and says, I bet I could make one of those in my basement. These are the heroes who keep ancient arts alive, and who probably have a healthy collection of slightly misengraved brass discs to show for their efforts. And the movement goes beyond high-end replicas. The astrolabe has re-entered the classroom. Teachers use simplified cardboard or plastic models to give students a tangible, intuitive feel for the celestial sphere. There are websites and software projects, like James E. Morrison's The Astrolabe Project, which offer free programs that can generate a printable set of astrolabe parts for any latitude on Earth. You can, with a printer, a piece of cardboard, and a bit of glue, create your own working astrolabe. Making a functional model of the cosmos out of an old pizza box is the ultimate science hack. It democratizes the instrument in a way that would have made Geoffrey Chaucer, writing for his little son Lewis, intensely proud. So the astrolabe lives on. It is no longer a necessary tool for telling time or navigating the globe. Its purpose has once again transformed. It is now a challenge for the craftsman, a teaching tool for the educator, and a source of profound satisfaction for the amateur who, after weeks of work, holds up their own creation, takes a sighting of a star, and finds that it actually works. It is a connection to the past, a hands-on history lesson, and a reminder that the desire to understand our place in the cosmos is a timeless human endeavor. The star-takers are with us still. The star-takers are with us still. And now you are back where our long journey began, standing in the quiet dark, under a sky overflowing with stars. You hold the astrolabe in your hand one last time. But everything has changed. The sky is no longer a chaotic mystery, and the brass disc is no longer an inscrutable puzzle. It feels familiar now, a trusted friend. You understand its language of lines and pointers, its elegant celestial grammar. You have traveled through its entire life, from its theoretical conception in ancient Greece to its quiet retirement in the halls of a museum, and even into its surprising rebirth in the modern world. What then is the ultimate legacy of this beautiful object? It is so much more than a single invention. The astrolabe had a longer, more successful run than most empires, and pretty much every boy band in history. For well over 1,000 years, it was the preeminent handheld scientific instrument, a testament to its robust and brilliant design. It is a perfect physical manifestation of the scientific impulse itself, a cycle of theory, observation, refinement, and application. It is an artifact that proves we have always been looking up, asking questions, and trying with our own hands to build a model of the universe that makes sense. In our modern world, we have powerful apps that can show us a perfect, interactive map of the night sky on our phones. But the astrolabe represents a kind of connection that we have perhaps lost. Philosophers of science sometimes debate whether the loss of this direct, physical engagement with scientific models in favor of purely digital abstractions has fundamentally changed our relationship with knowledge, making it feel more remote and less intuitive. An Astrolabe user didn't just see the sky. They held it, they manipulated it. The cosmos was not behind a screen. It was a tangible reality that fit in their palm. We have more data than they could have ever dreamed of, but they may have had a deeper, more immediate sense of perspective. The versatility of the Astrolabe meant it could be customized for almost any purpose. While we've talked about its main functions, some unique instruments were created for highly specific tasks, like a custom-coded app today. A court physician might commission an astrolabe with special markings to help him determine the most astrologically favorable times to let blood or administer herbal remedies. It was an infinitely adaptable tool for a world that saw the cosmos as directly relevant to every aspect of life. In the end, the astrolabe is just a very, very clever piece of metal that we taught how to speak the language of the stars. It is a symbol of our timeless, tireless, and deeply human need to find our own place in the silent, magnificent turning of the universe. And now our long journey with this remarkable object is coming to its gentle close. The story is told, and the cool brass in your hand feels familiar, its weight comfortable and reassuring. The intricate lines and curves, once so mysterious, now seem like the features of a well-known face. The crisp, cold air begins to soften, and the overwhelming brilliance of the night sky seems to gentle itself, the sharp points of starlight blurring ever so slightly at their edges. The questions of time and space, of fates and fortunes can now be set aside for the evening. They have been answered, and you can let them go, allowing your own mind to slowly, peacefully, begin to model not the turning of the heavens, but the quiet, drifting patterns of your own dreams. The immense and complex clockwork of the cosmos will continue its silent, patient dance without you for a few hours, as it always has, and as it always will. So let the weight of this ancient knowledge become a comforting anchor, pulling you gently down into a place of deep and untroubled rest. Feel the story fade, the images soften, and the quiet of the night become a soft blanket. Let your thoughts drift away now, like distant fading starlight, and ease into a peaceful sleep.